understanding, to listen for entertainment, and all of those different ways that you have to build those skills with them. Also their speaking skills. So we have so many class activities, instructional strategies that we can utilize with students to develop their speaking skills. And it's really important. And so one of the important instructional strategies for speaking is giving them vocabulary. So a lot of it with oral language is also developing that vocabulary, constantly pre-teaching certainly academic vocabulary, like if it's ELAR related, like let's say it's about tone or diction. Diction is an author's specific choice of words in order to, convey their attitude, their tone towards a particular topic. So that's what diction is. If we were going to analyze poetry and look at word choice and diction, it would be really important to pre-teach that vocabulary. But as far as the speaking portion of it, we would also want the students to utilize diction in their speech, right? So maybe one of the activities would be, after they've identified in groups, cooperative learning groups where they're talking about, and one of the first steps, and this is an actual activity that I used to do with my students all the time, would be like, okay, guys, look at the words. I want for y'all to identify the diction in there. And diction is not just any words. It's like particular words that they're using. Like, okay, they said the word anguish instead of like pained. What's the difference between pained and anguish as far as like tone is concerned? Pain is like not as harsh, right? It doesn't feel as intense or painful, if you will. The anguish sounds, more painful. So talking about words, have them talk about, utilize that language, go back to their seats, have a little bit of a open whole class discussion where you're talking about it again, utilizing, having them talk about and use the language, not only the academic language, but other language that they picked up. Maybe one of the words in the poem was anguish. And so that them utilizing those words, very important for their development as far as oral language is concerned. And so students build oral language, and this is true for our English language learners, and which is why it's important that everybody sort of understand that a quiet classroom, especially for a language learner, is a classroom that is not learning, certainly not developing language skills. So it used to be that administrators would walk by a classroom and they'd see everybody working on a worksheet and think that was the best case scenario for learning, and it's not the best case scenario. And someone who knows anything about the development of language, the development of skills, then they know that the students have to be talking to each other, to you, maybe to a class you Zoomed on the other side of the world to do an activity with, so that they'll have a chance to practice any new language that they've learned. And for us, it's like academic, but so too would you, and I've said this before in my PPR, tutorials, and in regards to pre-teaching for our English language learners, and this is important when you're an ELAR teacher. If you read through the short story you're going to do with your 8th graders, and the textbook or the text has chosen, 5 vocabulary words for you. Awesome. Certainly pre-teach the ones that they identified as content specific vocabulary. But as someone who really wants to build on oral language, and someone who is paying attention to the students' needs, which is what everyone should be doing, especially our language learners, you'll know if there's other words in the story that they might not understand. Especially in the Valley, this is true. Many of the textbooks are written for, you know, students that are geographically different, that are, and they're getting better now. They're trying to be more inclusive and be, but in any event, there were going to be some things that maybe they didn't understand that weren't academic specific or weren't identified as important vocabulary, but were going to impede on the ability to comprehend the text while we read it together. And so instead of just doing the 5 that the text identified, if I have to do 5 extra because I know that my students, and this was true, and it's more true now than ever, that all of our students on grade level, even our native English speakers, they are behind about 2 years in their oral language development. And it is because they didn't have direct instruction of vocabulary, whether it was academic or you know, basic interpersonal communication words. They didn't have that, and then they didn't have a place to practice it, and they didn't have people to talk to about it and ask. Like, even if you
Miss Salceda, I can't hear you. I don't know what happened. Mhm. Miss Salceda. I don't think she can hear me. No. Miss Salceda. I can't hear.
This meeting is being recorded. Being recorded.
Why can I not hear her? I can't hear her. The phone activity best oral proficiency, the EL speaking intermediate. Isn't my computer? Miss Salceda.
Specific. Let me see.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I couldn't hear you for like 10 minutes.
No.
Yes.
I am so sorry. I had no idea you couldn't hear me. I'm embarrassed now. I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, I was like, I can't hear her. Maybe it's my screen. Maybe it's my computer. I'm like, what the heck?
Okay. So where did you stop listening or hearing me? I'm so sorry.
When you want to go get your books.
Okay. So anyways, we use this and the kids really like it. Like even though it's a kid's book, like the language that is used and it's really a narcissist. It's about a spider and a fly. And the lesson is he flatters her, he gaslights her into like trusting him. Like even though she knows he's a spider and spiders eat flies, like he's like, gives her so many compliments and she just falls for it and she gets eaten. And so the message and they say a message at the end, but then we sort of like especially for kids in junior high, it's not so difficult for them to analyze this and feel like they're competent or smart, and we want to give them opportunities to like shine. So it says, and now, dear little children who may read the story, to idle, silly, flattering words, I pray you ne'er give heed unto an evil counselor. Close heart and ear and eye, and take a lesson from this tale of the spider and the fly. So they really like it, and I have them, like put it in like different in sort of in layman's terms in their own words, like what the message is. We look at they look at the visuals, and messaging, building of story plot, characterization, but all on a smaller bite-sized scale. You know what I mean? Because it's just a children's book. It's not like a novel. And they're able to feel like competent utilizing those content-specific skills, like analyzing a text for tone or author's message, and then they become more competent in doing it in more challenging text. But this first one, oral language, very important that we develop those skills for them, listening and speaking skills. And it's especially true for our English language learners, to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to support the development of their language, through beginning, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high. Remember, advanced high is nearly comparable to traditional English speaking, and everyone is sort of behind on their oral language development, if not 2 years, for sure 1 year, because of COVID. And just the lack of practice, hearing other people. You hear other people say new words in lunch, your history teacher says a new word, and so you pick up language constantly, and that lack of interaction certainly is showing. So this first one says, which of the following activities best helps develop oral language proficiency for English language learners speaking at an intermediate level of English language proficiency? So what are the keywords, and what is the question asking us to do? What are the keywords and phrases?
Following activity, develop language oral proficiency, the ELA, the English language learners, intermediate.
Right. So I also agree, very important, that we are trying to develop oral language proficiency. So that's really important, to pay attention to when you're taking the exam. What part of the whole language scheme is this asking for? Answering comprehension questions in class. Writing a narrative story. Is writing oral language?
No.
It's not. So make sure that you identify within the question and or scenario what exactly, in a specific way, dealing with language. And competency one is oral language. Are they looking for oral language? Are they looking for reading? Are they looking for writing development? Like, what is the question asking for? So we're looking for activities that develop oral language proficiency for English language learners at intermediate level. That is very important. They're telling us ELLs for sure. That's a special population we need to pay attention to, but they're also giving us the level, intermediate. And if you'll remember, beginners do not have hardly any to have a conversation with. That they lack basic interpersonal communication skills. So that's even like, I feel like I'm going to throw up, or I'm having a stomach cramp. Like, they won't know how to say that in English. They lack that. Or my stomach hurts, can I go to the nurse? They'll say that in Spanish. They might say things like yes, no, hungry, thirsty, restroom, but words like, but they won't be able to give a message off in the English language. They're going to utilize Spanish. Intermediates are going to be using a sort of, remember we took a look, did we take a look at it, or was it someone else?
Yeah, I know, it was us.
It was us. Okay, good. I'm sorry. I tutor so many students, and so sometimes, like, what we specifically look at, I'm like, and when we looked at this, they're like, we never looked at that. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was like, I like sports. Like, it was a simple,
exactly.
Like,
so it was very simple. It didn't go into details, and it didn't express the full meaning of what they were saying.
It had like no expression. Like, I really like this sport because like it was just very
right.
simple.
And so when she asked, why don't you join a team? She says, I have lots studies, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or something
I'm studying, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm study. So the message was, I really don't have time for that, even though I like sports a whole bunch, because I have to study a lot. Like, it's hard. So that message was, simplified to what an intermediate student would be able to do. An advanced student is going to be able to give us a bit more. So let's take a look at the answer choices. We have having a conversation. So the goal is we're looking for activities that would best develop oral language in an intermediate student, right? That's the goal. And sometimes saying the goal is like so beneficial because you're able to sort of eliminate answer choices. Like, because we said oral language, writing a narrative can't happen. Viewing dramatic television shows, is this the best for an intermediate to remember? Oral language is listening and speaking. It's not just speaking.
It's kind of like a maybe, because like that's kind of hard, because
will they be practicing speaking if they're just watching like you know, Bart Simpson?
No, they're just listening to crazy
it only
Bart.
has listening. And if you're doing an activity that it's really going to target best, and remember, we're looking for best, which means it should do both. And we can't always do best. Sometimes we target just listening skills, right? And then later we'll speak about it in different ways, but they want something listening and speaking. So D cannot be the right answer either. Answering comprehension questions in class.
So that's like speaking because they're answering, right? And they're listening to the question.
Yes.
So that one should be it, question mark.
For an intermediate ELL student?
And probably not comprehension questions. They probably won't. I think that's more advanced and advanced high.
It is exactly more advanced and advanced high. Yeah. And so that's not going to be the best way for you to build. Maybe assessing them, like if you want to assess them, they can answer comprehension questions in class. But this is the best way to develop more oral language proficiency. And the way to do that always and every time is going to be, like I said before, is having classrooms where people are speaking. Having a conversation with the teacher is the best way. And let's see if that's what they actually say. Let's take a look at this. I want to know. Hey, of course, I sometimes question myself when I haven't seen, because sometimes they give you like ridiculous things and I'm like, I object. So yes, having a conversation, myriad, multiple, manifolds, many conversations with you, with each other, you know, with their other teachers, with the cafeteria lady, with the janitor, whomever they can practice listening and speaking skills with. Conversations are the best for listening and speaking. So having them do think, pair, shares, find somebody who, all of those sort of, they're not activities that are going to be like graded very heavily. They're a lot less stressful, right? But they get them to practice the language, and we have to get them to practice the language, both academic and their like basic, you know, especially for our ELL students with their basic interpersonal communication skills. So the answer says A is correct because social interactions in standard English, they are critical, which is why we have this delay in progress and growth systemically across the United States, probably across the world after COVID, with those that were developing oral language. Those of us that had it already, cool. Like, we still develop our oral language a little bit. But I mean, for those where it's critical, the kids EC through 12, they really had stunted growth. And that's because you need social interactions in standard English in order to develop. And this is true for everyone, but it's especially true for our English language learners. So answering simple comprehension questions does not give the ELL the opportunity to practice conversational proficiencies. Oh, so maybe they were answering them on paper, which is even less, like, you know, that's less.
That's more advanced high too. If it's written on paper and not orally, well, advanced will be okay still. Like they
they'd be okay. Yeah, they'd still be okay.
But not going to like great detail like the advanced high kids that like know how to write like really good.
Right. And so, I mean, I've noticed because I have a master's degree in English and I'm a linguist first and foremost. I mean, I'm a crazy person because I could never like decide within English like which side I liked best, you know, because I love literature and I've always been a big reader and I love analyzing it and how it affects, you know, changes things and movements and um but I also love like the linguistic sort of science side of it. So I have a little bit of both. And as my children have grown, the five of them, I have noticed the way in which, because my five children have always gotten the compliment from strangers that they speak really well and that they have high vocabulary. But because I'm always talking to them, and so when my two younger kids, and they're the ones that I really started paying attention to because they were the ones that people said it so often and still say it, but because they had three older siblings to practice their oral language proficiency to. So they practiced with me, then they went and practiced with their older brother and their older sister and their other older brother. And so but I noticed things like if I said something and even if they were just like eavesdropping on a question, they'll ask, what's that mean? You know what you said there, and I'll say, well, that means blah 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 blah. And then later, not immediately, they'll repeat it in their, you know, like in their normal language. And
Yeah.
that's what happens when you listen to conversations and you hear things and you're but it has to be like sort of organic. It can't always be scripted, which is why we need to have so many opportunities for the kids to have conversations about what they're learning about, you know, whether it's the literature, whether it's the concepts, whether it's current events, expository text, you know, because that's an important um, branch in our ELL curriculum, not ELL, our ELAR curriculum is, you know, literary texts, which are more literature, story based, and then our expository texts, which are informational. And those are the ones that, you know, they have particular organizational like frameworks, like a compare and a contrast, compare and contrast, or a cause and effect type paper will have particular language that they use, particular transitions, and in 4 through 8 we have to teach those things. So it's important for you. Have you taken a look at the TEKS 4 through 8?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, so it's just
Before I was just a math teacher. Like I teach math and social studies.
uh-huh.
But last year I taught reading intervention. I taught all four subjects. I'm not going to sit here and lie. Math, science, and social studies. I have four preps last year, and they got it down to two since I started coaching. And
Oh,
I kept
oh my God, they did you a favor. Did they do you a favor, or is it because they needed you somewhere else?
they needed me somewhere else. It wasn't because like I was coaching. I would have stayed with my four preps.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. That's, you know, that's a lot. It really, really, really is. So I'm glad that they rectified that for you. But yeah, you should definitely go back and take a look at it just to see what particular order in which, because that's important too, you know, like the order in which we sort of teach things, like the, you know, the different um age groups 4 through 8. Not only that, but like I forgot what I was talking about. Like,
TEKS.
yes, the TEKS, the way in which we do things. There's like a particular order. So like whenever we're teaching writing, we're certainly going to begin with like pre-writing skills, right? We're going to like have to do that first. We can't go like, okay, guys, writing, and then here's a piece of paper and you guys write your first draft. That cannot be ever the case. It has to be like, hey,
No.
and every single time you do a writing, it has to be a review of that process of the pre-writing, of, you know, like, so whether that's like with different graphic organizers, maybe it's a bubble graph, maybe it's like, you know, they can go straight to outlining, maybe not. And then how much do you get into outlining within the different grade levels, because they do get a little bit more rigorous with their writing, difference between 4 through 8. The idea that, rough draft, thesis statements, those type of things, those ideas are going to have to be reviewed as well. Let's take a look at this next one. Literacy development. The teacher understands the foundations of literacy development. Now, I want to just really quickly, what is it? Core 4 through 8. I just want to see the standards. TEXES standards, because this is just giving us the overview, the overarching, like,
that's like literally the whole competency. Teachers understand foundational of early literacy development.
That's it.
Yeah.
No, there has to be the standards. I'm looking for the standards on the. Let me go here. No.
Prep manual.
No. I'm looking for the one, like, the standards. Like
from
TEA, because it'll give us like detailed. Here we are. I don't know why it doesn't just save that. Okay, so not EC6. We're gonna look through. Here it is, 4 through 8. So this gives us, and remember, like, they have moved around the standards to be incorporated like into the competency. So they might have smushed two together and made something else. But we're gonna assessment of developing literacy. So teacher understands basic principles of assessment and use a variety of literacy assessments. So we know that competency 2 of that exam is standard 8 of the actual TEA standards. And these standards are like by law. We have to do these. They're like approved and like, by legislature, and it's what we're required to do, what we're required to know on the left-hand side, and what we should be able to do on the right-hand side. We read this in the exact same way that we read the PPR standards document. But let me, I'm gonna just save this really quickly so I can send it to you. Let's take a look at it.
I stay up and I read, and then I watch YouTube videos on this test.
Oh my goodness.
Because I am like, I just want to keep my contract.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are different ways, different things a teacher can utilize to like inform where their literacy is. So we could do a literary assessment. So we have screening devices, norm reference achievement tests, criterion reference, state tests, curriculum-based reading assessments, informal reading inventories. We use formative and summative assessments. Let me see. The reciprocal nature of assessment and instruction, knowing that, like, that's really important for literacy assessment, I guess, that it has to be like ongoing, like we're keeping track and assessing where they are and the progressing of their literacy in English. And that entails us assessing them formally and informally. So the bulk of it's going to be formative assessments, right, in your classroom, just assessing their reading, writing, speaking, listening skills, their literacy. We use multiple ongoing assessments to plan literacy instruction and monitor students' literacy development. Analyze students' errors in reading and writing, and use the results of this analysis as a basis for future instruction. So if I give an open-ended response, not an open-ended response, yeah, an open-ended response, after, a very short story and I ask them to utilize textual evidence, and I see many of them didn't use it, or the evidence they did use didn't support their answer, then I would know that I would need to do an entire new lesson on, supporting your answers in an utilizing textual evidence. So making sure that you're identifying their weaknesses so that you can plan to either reteach those or find different ways to strengthen and support those weaknesses. Using ongoing assessment and knowledge of TEKS to determine when students may be in need of classroom intervention, specialized reading instruction, and development of appropriate instructional plan. So this is really important. Let's say that you're a 7th grade ELAR teacher and you notice that a student is having a lot of time of comprehension, reading things by themselves on grade level. And so we need to find ways and do sort of like an inventory. Where is the breakdown in comprehension? Like, is this a language barrier? Is this a learning disability gone unrecognized, like dyslexia? Is that, like, what is going on? And to always be checking to make sure that the students are progressing as is normal in their development. And then you would develop appropriate plan or instruction, whatever they're in need of. Teach students the use of self-evaluation and self-monitoring to enhance their own literacy development. So self-evaluation and self-monitoring, what does that look like in an ELAR classroom? That looks like, let's say we read a short story. Let's say we read a short story and I gave them, it's chunked into different paragraphs. Well, I could tell the students, write a small paragraph about what each, not paragraph, a small, phrase or sentence about what that paragraph's about. That is them monitoring their understanding, of the text that they just read. It's metacognition, but it's also evaluation of their literacy, which we want for them to do. We want for them to evaluate what they understood and what they know. Make sure that you communicate with the parents, that they're part of it, that they know what's going on, that they know what you're looking at. And elementaries do a really great job about showing you where their literacy is in kind of a more specific way. EC through 6. And I'm always like, I pay attention every marking period on because I have a first grader and a kindergartner, like where they are. And they use like a letter system. And then it tells you, where they are in their reading and then their literacy development, their math. And I want to see, are they above? Are they on grade level? And so it's important to me that I stay on top of it and monitor that. And so getting the parents to understand that, maybe having a professional develop with them on Meet the Teacher about looking that over and staying, connected, practicing with them. Hey, I see that you have to go. So we'll end it here, but we'll continue on a later date.
When are you gonna be able to like meet again? What time or what date do you think you're gonna meet again?
I mean, we can meet again as many days as you need during your conference period, because that time period is open right now of this week. Next week is going to be closed. So like tomorrow, if you wanted to. Also,
yeah, we can. Yeah, I'm writing my notes. Yeah, I have the same questions you have.
Okay.
I printed them out. I'm like, you know what? Because I was gonna start taking like practice tests, so I printed them out. So like everything, like I'm trying to like get as much as I can.
Yes, absolutely.
Because like honestly, I don't read the questions very well. Obviously, I'm looking at like, if I would just read questions extremely well, I would be okay. But
I know you will use the same strategies.
And that's the thing, when I retook it the third time. Bye, Noah. Go to lunch. I'll see you later. I'm on a meeting and you're cussing out loud. Bye. Noah.
Oh my goodness. I have a Noah. He's the sweetest thing.
He's sweet, but salty.
Yeah, I know the kind.
And I'm like looking at the question we dissected. I'm like, I just went over the question better. Because honestly, I would have chose B. If I'm looking at that first question, I would have chose B. I'm like, comprehension, yes. But and then I'm looking at it like, maybe
Yeah,
that's too advanced because like I'm looking at this
it
like
is. It's not appropriate. Remember, you're trying to choose the best activity based on the appropriateness of the specific students. If they tell you an age group, a grade level, a special population, that means ELL, special ed, that means they want you to take that into special consideration. So in doing that, considering that they're intermediates, having those discussions over comprehension is going to be too above what their language abilities are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm like, oh wow, that's okay. And I'm looking at it because I'm like, because some of the questions like are about phonics too, like which one has a control R vowel. I'm like, okay, so this has something that's super like
specific,
like very specific like that. I'm like, okay, so I had to like think of the word out loud in my head, like, okay, break. Strength, like it's one of those things where like I have to say it, but I don't want to say it too loud where people are like looking at me when I take the test.
And the thing is, you do have to say it because that's how we teach them in class. Like we tell the students, okay, guys, say it. Where do you hear it? Like, or do you hear that E or is silent? Like, say it.
Yeah.
Right now.
So like I'm saying it out loud, and I'm like, this is really loud. And I'm like,
yeah, just like.
Standard, and I have to like make sure like I mute it, but like I try putting the R like is it that strong or not?
Yeah.
So no, okay. So tomorrow we can meet again during this time because that's perfect. As long as I get my 20 to 30, and kids are always in my class. As you could tell, people like wondering in my class.
Yeah.
While you were, I got all this assignments right now. They magically appeared on my desk. So I have
during a meeting, they magically appear. They were brought in by little fairies.
Yeah, so like, and then I have one student that does not like going to her classes, and we have an understanding with me. It's my partner teacher. She's also a 6th grade teacher, so like, she's like, you could deal with her today. She don't want to be in my class. Like, oh great, awesome.
Thanks for that.
And I told her I have to be in a meeting. I'll put my headphones on. And I'll stay quiet, miss. I'll stay quiet. She said, and she's like, she has a lot of problems at home. So I'm like, yeah, just sit there, stay quiet, put your headphones on really loud so you don't hear me. She's like, okay.
Well, that's awesome.
But no, yeah, they're like, we're just here. I'm like, my kids are wonderful. They love cussing. 6th graders.
Oh, I know. They feel that it makes them feel adults. It's their way of rebellion safely.
And I think that's what it is. I'm like, like I want to hear you. I'm like, I'm in the meeting. You're cussing. That's nice. But they're good kids. They just have a hard life.
No, too many of these kids have a really hard life. It makes me so sad. What school district did you teach at again?
Santa Maria.
That's right. Yeah.
My principal says he knows you. I'm like, oh, you do know my tutor.
Hey, who is it?
Joe Baz Palacios.
Who? Oh. What was his name?
Joe Baz. I can't say it in Spanish.
That's the principal. Tell him I said hello. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's my principal, Mr. Palacios. He's like, tell Stephanie I say hi. I'm like, okay, when I get to see her again, I will.
Yes, tell him I said hello. I hope he and his family are doing well.
No, yeah, I'll tell him he's probably going to lunch. And I told the person I was going to have my PLC with, I told her because she came. I'm like, I'm in the meeting. I'll go 7th period when I have my other conference. I have a planning period / remote learning, and then I have conference. So I'm like, if I could just do my remote learning, and I'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, but it's okay. Well, I'll let you go because I have to go eat lunch.
Yes, have a beautiful rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Miss Salcedo.
Yes, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.